There is a lonely train called the 310 to Yuma. The pounding of the wheels is more like a mournful sigh. There's a legend and there's a rumor. When you take the 310 to Yuma, you can see the ghosts of outlaws go riding by, in the sky.
Good evening, this is GW Johansson again with another Criterion update. I didn't know it'd be this soon for another one, and I did it again. I bought a ton of Criterions. Not as much as last time, but I have 18 right here, 18 Blu-ray Criterion releases that I'm going to share today with you. So let's get started. First up, we have Samuel Fuller's Shock Corridor. This is one of my favorite Samuel Fullers. I love him. He's one of my favorites, and this is up there with The Steel Helmet and Pick Up on South Street. This was one of the many films that inspired Scorsese with his campy Shutter Island, which I enjoy immensely for the reasons that he's kind of making a throwback to these kind of films. This Blu-ray is awesome because it has the documentary, The Typewriter, the Rifle, and the Movie Camera, which is awesome because it has footage of Samuel Fuller, his life, his work, and also Tim Robbins and Quentin Tarantino. There's one scene where early in the documentary where they go into Samuel Fuller's garage and it's full of his movie memorabilia. The steel helmet is just hanging out on the top of a box of like more memorabilia, and you could just, and the unlikeliest duo, Tim Robbins and Quentin Tarantino, just looking at everything, gawking at everything, and just knowing Tarantino, the ultimate movie nerd of us all, and he's just able to be in that environment.
The motion picture screen opens the door to sights you've never seen before. Shock Corridor.
Next up, we have Fritz Lang's M. This is a very good, very, very good early sound film from Germany by Fritz Lang, you know, after Metropolis and some of his other science fiction, silent film classics. And this is kind of like the beginning of the police procedural, and also brought in Peter Lorre to the screen, and he is creepy. This is a great, great Criterion for if you just want information on Fritz Lang or that time of German filmmaking. And it's got a long-lost English dubbed version of this. It's got a commentary. It's got an interview, like a 50-minute interview with Fritz Lang by William Friedkin. That's incredible. So this is a great release. And I feel like this is going to be out of print soon. I don't know why, but I just feel like for some reason this has been out on Blu-ray for so long that they're going to lose their license to distribute this. So I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but you might want to pick this up soon. Next up, we have Seijun Suzuki's Branded to Kill. I really enjoy this. This is one of my favorite Seijun Suzuki or 50s noir films. If you've ever seen Youth of the Beast or Tokyo Drifter, this is probably the best of all of them. It's shot in black and white, which looks good, but, you know, compared to Tokyo Drifter, that's the more visually stimulating film, Technicolor, beautiful widescreen. But this one is kind of just, it's in its own realm. It's black and white, and it's you know, at the time when they could be using Technicolor, it's just very bizarre. You got Joe Shishido in this as usual in a Seijun Suzuki film, and he's just like, let's just say that he gets turned on by the smell of steaming rice. Yeah, so I mean, if that sounds like a cool movie to you, then go all for this. This is an awesome film. It's really interesting. It's got a couple of interviews, but it has this interview with Joe Shishido that is probably one of the best interviews I've ever seen. What he does is he's at the interview with the people, and he's just kind of rambling, and he's talking about his monologue that he does when he gets into his cool guy mode. And he's talking, you know, my mother didn't love me, my father killed my mother, and I saw the bastard. And right when he's talking about when he faces his dad or whatever, this character of his, this monologue that he's talking about, he pulls out a replica like Colt 45 Peacemaker. He pulls it out and points it right to the camera and just and like shoots it. And it sounds real. It's an actual replica revolver with a cap in it. And he shoots it, and you could just tell the people behind the camera are just shaking. The camera actually shakes, and everyone kind of screams. And I mean, it was part of like he was just hiding under this table the whole time. And then everyone just laughs it off. But you know, you could just tell they were shitting their pants. But it's pretty awesome. Like, it's a great movie. But that interview is one of the best on any of these Blu-rays. Next up, we have Irvin S. Eworth Jr.'s The Blob. As the tagline says, 82 minutes of concentrated motion picture terror in blood-curdling color. And it does look great in color, Technicolor, to be technical. And that's a great poster, too. Sadly, I think that the DVDs used to come with a full poster that you could pull out, and like in the Rushmore, you get this map of Rushmore, and but unfortunately, it's not in here. There's a great booklet in here that's really good looking, but unfortunately no poster. And also, this is one of the $30 Criterions. I don't know if anyone else is a little upset about this, but it is digitally restored in 4K resolution, or 4K restoration, which is interesting because it's The Blob, and I kind of feel like some of these other great films should use, be able to get the 4K treatment instead of just 2K. I really don't know what that means. Like, is 4K because it really needs that 4K, and 2K is for the movies that still look good and were preserved well, so they only need 2K? But anyways, it doesn't have any features other than photos of some guy's memorabilia and 2 audio commentaries. I think that the audio commentaries, I guess, are worthy of the $30 price tag, because that means, that's 160 minutes of bonus features if you look at that way. But I just wish there was more on this. I feel like they could have brought some sort of avid fans of The Blob, like, I don't know, call up Edgar Wright or someone who would know something about this, and I would just love to see some, more fan-like interviews like that from filmmakers. But still, it's a really good buy, and if you've never seen The Blob, I'd highly recommend it if you're into 50s B-movie horror. And it's got a young Steve McQueen, too. Well, not too young, but he plays a teenager, though he looks like he's 30-something. It works for the movie, though. It's Steve McQueen. I can't complain. Next up, we have Jim Jarmusch's Down by Law. I saw this in film class about a year ago, and pretty instantly it became my favorite Jarmusch film. I haven't seen all of his films. I haven't seen Ghost Dog. I haven't seen Mystery Train. There's a couple in there that I haven't seen, but I don't really know if they could top this one. Beautiful cinematography by Robbie Mueller. The 3 leads, John Lurie, Roberto Benigni, and Tom Waits, all do a great job. And it's just a wonderful prison story that also is somewhat of a fairy tale hybrid. And it's got a bunch of great bonus features. It looks beautiful to begin with. It's got a bunch of interviews and Q&As with Jarmusch and the cast. I'm pretty sure it's got a couple of music videos in there, there's a bunch of musicians in this film. But if you haven't seen it, I'd highly recommend it. And if you have seen it and you enjoy it, this is a great Blu-ray to get. Next up, we have Powell and Pressburger's The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. I love Powell and Pressburger, as you've probably noticed in my last couple updates. And this is their first Technicolor, foray into Technicolor times, which is easily their best of films that they've made. And this, I would say, is their most epic. It spans across many decades of the early 20th century. And it's also, I think, their most ambitious in scope, because they tackle a bunch of different times, different wars, different characters, makeup, and I think it comes off flawlessly. And again, Technicolor, beautiful on Blu-ray. Scorsese's in a bunch of the bonus features, which is a bonus. It's in itself. But he talks about how he's got another restoration example. He always does that videos in the other Black Narcissus and the Red Shoes. And in here again, he talks about how it was to restore the Technicolor, and it shows in the picture quality of this film. So if you like Technicolor, if you like Powell and Pressburger, I'd highly recommend this, especially if you also like epics.
This is it. Sir? Sir?
Go away.
General Win Kennedy.
Eh? What? Who is it?
Lieutenant Wilson, sir. 2nd Battalion, the Loamshire, sir.
What do you want, eh?
Well, sir, I'm afraid, sir, we've,
Well, say it, man. Say it. I've no time to waste.
Oh, yes, you have, sir.
I beg your pardon, sir.
You've got all night, sir.
Attendant!
I'm afraid he can't come.
Why?
He's a prisoner, sir.
What's going on here?
Invasion, sir.
But you damned young idiot, war starts at midnight, haven't you been told?
Next up, we have Andrei Tarkovsky's Ivan's Childhood. I have yet to see another Andrei Tarkovsky movie. He's one of those directors where I kind of like, I want to start with his first film and go through it as his filmography went on, as, you know, his career went on. I want to see how he transformed. And this was released in '62, I believe. And it is one of the best war films I've ever seen. I just recently saw it in the past year, and it blew me away. The black and white cinematography is incredible. The acting, especially from the little kid, is unbelievable. And it is just one of the best children in war films. If you've seen something like Come and See, which I highly recommend, it's very much like that, just not as edgy, since that had a good 20 or so years on this film. But if you're looking for war films, I would highly, highly recommend Ivan's Childhood.
Давай помогу.
Я сама.
Сама. Эх.
Next up, we have Jean-Luc Godard's Breathless. I don't know what else to say about Breathless that's already been said. The first sentence in this description says there was before Breathless and there was after Breathless. But what I can say is this is a great Blu-ray. I feel like Breathless is the definite Criterion movie. It's like why Criterion was made, was to release movies like Breathless, if not just Breathless. So it has interviews in it. It has a commentary. It has... Actually, it does not have a commentary. That is surprising. But it also has a great 80-minute French documentary. It's got a couple of visual essays, and it has a short film that Godard did with Belmondo, which is really interesting. And Melville talks about the movie too, who was, I think, a producer on it. And I love seeing Melville. He's my French filmmaker god of cinema. But it comes in a nice digibook pack, and it's beautifully colored. Interesting for a black and white film. But it's kind of like a staple of Criterion Blu-rays, so it's highly, highly recommended. Next up, Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times. If you have any Charlie Chaplin film on Blu-ray or any Criterion release, you could just tell that they love Chaplin. They just jam-pack it with all the bonus features they can, just all the information they can about Chaplin, and this is no different. For the film, I really like it. It was probably the last Chaplin film I've watched as for the first time recently, couple years ago, and it's really good. It's one of his best. It's showing kind of like, you know, the change in time, as well as technically the film was still silent when it was made during the talkies. So this was made in '36, so films have been talkies for a while, and he still produced a mostly silent film, and it was kind of his farewell to the tramp character that he always played. It looks great. It's got Beautiful black and white for a Chaplin film, and the last shot of the movie is one of my all-time favorites. Paulette Goddard's in it, who's beautiful, and it's got a commentary. It's got a couple of visual essays. They talk about the sound and the music of the film. They go through like every little detail about this film. There's home videos of him, Chaplin, short films, and there's also a really interesting documentary about Cuban first-time moviegoers seeing modern time, and that's pretty incredible. So yeah, another highly recommended Criterion release. Next up is Jean-Pierre Melville's Léon Morin Priest. It has Jean-Paul Belmondo as a priest, and which is interesting because he's always playing the cool guy. But it is a film that just was out of print on Criterion just recently. I think it was the past year. They had a month where, like a month before they went out of print, they were saying, hey, these are going out of print, get them while you can. And so I picked this one up. I never saw it before this, and I got it for like only $15 too, which is a steal. I unfortunately did not pick up Army of Shadows. I'm really upset about that, so hopefully I'll find a good price for that on Amazon soon. But I already had Le Cercle Rouge, and this one's got some neat selected scene commentary. It's got some deleted scenes, but it also has a really great interview with Melville, who I love, and Belmondo, who's great as well. And it's just cool to see yet another like teaming of, you know, gods of cinema together, and they're just on this television interview. They just seem like they have great chemistry, and so making movies together must have been awesome. Next up is Ernst Lubitsch's Design for Living. I love Lubitsch, and I've come to love him in the past couple of years, just trying to watch all of his films. He's one of those filmmakers that does not have a single bad movie. And this isn't one of his best, I'd say, but it's still a really strong screwball comedy from the pre-Code era. And it's written by Ben Hecht, who I think is one of the top 3 all-time writers. And it has Friedrich March, Gary Cooper, Miriam Hopkins, which are the best part of the movie. Just seeing them do this 3-way love triangle, and all of their chemistry together is wonderful. It's so fun to watch. Puts a smile on your face. And the bonus features on this are great too. Not as strong as I think the next Lubitsch release I'll show you in a bit, but it still has some interviews and some selected scene commentary. So really good pre-Code era comedy. Also just awesome to see that early 30s era. I love that. And it's got a great cover with that type of font. Next up is Hitchcock's The Man Who Knew Too Much, the original 1934 version with Peter Lorre at yet another very creepy role. This is a great Blu-ray. It's got some commentary. It's got some interviews with Hitchcock. It's another interview excerpt of Truffaut and Hitchcock from the 60s. They have that in the other British Hitchcock releases on Criterion, The Lady Vanishes and The 49 Steps. And again, I love these British espionage thrillers that he did before he came to America and did Hollywood films. And this is one of those great just mysteries. The opening scene of this movie is one of my favorite in all of his 30s films, because it's like they're at this, it's very Bond feeling. They're at this Switzerland party, and someone sniped through the window, and he gives like his last breath saying like, you know, go do this for me, and then it takes the people on a mission. Interesting cover art too. Why is the font in bright orange? I'm kind of missing what that's connected to the movie, but it looks good though. Next is Elia Kazan's On the Waterfront. This is one of the greatest Blu-ray releases, Criterion or otherwise. It is in a huge digibook, as you can tell, and it's got a bunch of essays, and it's got 2 discs full of like everything you'd need to know about that era, about Elia, about the film, and it has all the different versions of the film. I think it was released in, 3 different versions of the film. It was released in different widescreen and full screen and different type of different presentations, and they're all in 4K. They all look great, and I just can't believe they went through so much time and effort into one movie. And I mean, they couldn't have chose a better movie. And and if you haven't seen On the Waterfront, I highly recommend it. Some of the best acting you'll see, some of the tightest directing, and it looks great on Criterion. Thank you, Criterion. I didn't even expect a movie like this to come out on Criterion, but, you know, dreams come true.
You wonder my philosophy of life? Do it to him before he does it to you.
I never met anyone like you. There's not a spark of sentiment or romance or human kindness in your whole body.
What good does it do you besides get you in trouble?
And when things and people get in your way, you just knock them aside. Get rid of them. Is that your idea?
Listen, don't look at me when you say that. It wasn't my fault what happened to Joey. Fixing him wasn't my idea.
Who said it was?
Well, everybody's putting a needle on me. You and a mug in a church and Father Barry. I didn't like the way he was looking at me.
He was looking at everybody the same way.
Oh, yeah?
Next up, we have Fritz Lang's Ministry of Fear. This is one of the many espionage spy thrillers that he'd do during wartime, World War II time, when he came to America to make films. It stars Ray Milland, and it's a lot of fun. It's just a really fun World War II thriller, and I just love that era. You know, this came out in one of the best eras of filmmaking, and it's one of the $20 Blu-rays too. So you know, it only has an interview and it has one essay in the booklet, but you know, it's still a lot of fun, and it's always worth getting another Criterion, especially when they're $20. I wish they'd do that more often. Next up, we have Delmer Dave's Jubal. I saw this right before it was released because I heard about it in the upcoming, and I thought, Delmer Dave's Jubal? I've never heard of this. Like, I really like Delmer Dave's. I like 310 to Yuma, which was also released at this time, but I never heard Jubal. So you know, be it Criterion to release a movie that was underrated in 4K and you know, bring it to attention. And so I love westerns. I love Delmer Dave's. I love Glenn Ford, Ernest Borgnine, Rod Steiger when he's a menace. And this has it all. And it's very Shakespearean, the story. It's type of tragedy that they're going across. And Technicolor, widescreen, it looks beautiful. This is another one of those bare bones Blu-rays. It's $20, and all it has is a booklet, but it's a great booklet. And if you're interested in seeing a very, very underrated, overlooked Western, if you love Delmer Dave's, Glenn Ford, Technicolor, this is a very, very highly recommended Blu-ray. And next up, we have 310 to Yuma by Delmer Dave's, also with Glenn Ford. I'm guessing a lot of you have seen the remake, and if you haven't seen the 310 to Yuma, the original, I highly, highly recommend it. It's a lot better than the remake. Remake's very action-oriented, whereas this is much more on story and characters. I feel like the remake took a lot of sacrifices with the story to make it a lot more modern, but I feel like this is the ultimate version. And it's got great black and white. It's also a 4K restoration that Jubal got. And I am a little upset with the bonus features on this because all it has is a couple of interviews, about 3 of them, and it has a booklet, and it's a $30 price tag on this one. But still, it's a great movie, and it's hard. It's very few and far between when Criterion does a Western release. So, and I love Westerns. It's one of my all-time favorite genres. So, whenever they're gonna bring something to Blu-ray, I'm just gonna have to pick it up. And it looks great, and it's a great film. I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. Next up is Guillermo del Toro's The Devil's Backbone. I recently watched it this month, actually, because all I do in October is watch horror films. That's like my way of, watching more movies, but instead I just take a genre and I go at it. So I finally got around to seeing The Devil's Backbone, and it is a really, really good movie. Good enough for me to run out the next day and go grab it on Criterion Blu-ray. And I won't say it's his best, because I'd say Pan's Labyrinth is superior to this film, though they are both very, very similar. They are in the... We watched the film through the eyes of a little kid in... I don't know if the Pan's Labyrinth was in Spain or Mexico, but this one takes place in Mexico during a Revolutionary War, Civil War, I think. And very 40s, 50s-ish. And it's through their eyes, so it kind of turns into not just horror, because Guillermo del Toro likes to say that horror, the scariest characters in his movies are the real ones, not the imaginative ones. So this is a ghost story, but takes it across a very horror fantasy-like hybrid, which Pan's Labyrinth does a lot. So if you like Pan's Labyrinth, I'd highly recommend checking this one out. And Guillermo del Toro worked with the Criterion Collection to make these Blu-rays, and you could just tell he put so much love and care and affection into these Blu-rays for the fans, because there's so much bonus features in this, and to the point where Criterion releases aren't they're just not made like this. Like, there's an interactive menu in here that goes through his sort of his drawings and his concept art. And then you can actually like click on the things in the interactive menu, and it brings a whole new video up where he just discusses that aspect of the movie, or that creature, that motif, or whatever. So it's really interesting to see this movie being dissected so much. I wish they would do that to Pan's Labyrinth. I wish they'd bring it to Criterion. But for now, we have The Devil's Backbone, which is the second best thing you can get. Last but not least, Ernst Lubitsch's To Be or Not to Be. When I heard this was being released, it was never released before on Criterion, but when I heard it was being released, I freaked. This is one of my all-time favorite comedies. When it first came out back during wartime, it was very much disowned because it's a very, very dark comedy, and it deals with the Nazis, and it somewhat jokes about the Holocaust at times, not at it, but about it. And because the movie is these Polish theater actors are pretending to be Nazis to stop this spy. And there's a certain running joke about concentration camp Ehrenhard, I think his name is. And it's just so dark, and it could not work at that time, but it's one of those movies that had transcended time and has now found a place in movie history. But again, it's Ernst Lubitsch, who I love. He's just got some of the best screwball comedies of that time. And this Blu-ray has one of his short films. It has a commentary. And then it has a French documentary about the filmmaker himself, which is really exciting, especially for me being such a big fan. So I highly recommend it. The front cover art's pretty neat, too. And it's a good place to start for Lubitsch if you ever want to try to get into him. I'd say start with To Be or Not to Be.
But, Mr. Dobosh, look, if you'll just give me a chance,
Who made you up?
I did, Mr. Dobosh. What's wrong with it?
I don't know. It's not convincing. To me, he's just a man with a little mustache.
But so is Hitler.
No. It's not just the mustache. It's something, I don't know. Well, I just can't smell Hitler in him.
I can.
I know. That picture. That's what he should look like.
But that picture was taken of me.
Then the picture's wrong, too.
Well, that's all for today. 18, I think we got through, and hopefully I'm going to try to resist the urge to buy the next couple of months' new releases, because there's like Thief, there's Nashville, there's Throne of Blood, Rafifi, Francis Ha, City Lights. I mean, there's so many that I'm like, ooh. And then, of course, like, so many past ones that I'm still catching up to get. Cocteau's Beauty and the Beast, I think, is right now like my #1 next Criterion I want to buy. But yeah, tell me what you guys have picked up and what you recommend. And even for me seeing, because I haven't seen every Criterion out there, and the more I see, like I just saw La Haine, now I want that Criterion. Go figure. So any suggestions, comments, whatever, give me below, and I'll see you in probably another 6 months or so.